And joining us now is former Assistant U.S. Attorney David Weinstein. David, welcome. Thanks for coming. So I want to get your reaction, first of all, to Julie Swetnick's sworn affidavits. 3 pages. She makes some very disturbing allegations in here. And she also kind of indicates that it's a pattern of behavior, not just what happened to her where Brett Kavanaugh was present, allegedly, but also that there was a pattern of drunken behavior where men took advantage or boys took advantage of girls in that high school environment. Can you just give us your reaction to that?
Sure. What's significant about her affidavit is this is an individual who has a lot to lose if she made a false statement. She holds positions of importance, she has security clearances, and she's giving a statement now under oath, subject to perjury, where she says, look, this is what I recall. And she's not making it any better or any worse than what it is. She's saying what she recalls, pointing out this pattern and practice that was engaged in by, in her words, Kavanaugh and others, a cadre of people who he was a part of. It calls into question his character, whether he remembers what happens, whether he denies what happens. She is yet another witness who is now raising questions about the character of an individual who is supposed to be going to one of the highest positions in our country to make decisions about everybody's everyday life.
Now, she's the latest accuser. The original accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, we read her statement, and she said this happened in way back in 1982 at a high school party in the Maryland, suburban Maryland area, and she identifies by name Mark Judge, who was Brett Kavanaugh's classmate. He was inside that room, and according to her, he saw what happened. Why can't we get him to come before the Senate Judiciary Committee and testify? Why can't that happen?
Ask your senators. They could serve him with the subpoena. They could ask him to come and testify in front of them and ask him to recall what his memory and recollection was of this, to either confirm or not confirm what the statements are of these other individuals.
Well, he has said in statements to the press that he has no recollection of this. How do you handle something like that as a questioner or an attorney?
Anybody can have a bad or a poor or faulty recollection. So what you have to do as the listener, whether you're a juror, whether you're one of the members of the Judiciary Committee, you have to take a look at the other factors surrounding why he's telling you he doesn't remember. Is there some sort of bias that he's leaning towards and that's why he doesn't remember? Has a lot of time passed? Is there some other reason why he may or may not have a recollection of this? Is there another time when he did recall it, sometime closer to the event, and now he's saying he doesn't recall it? He's written a number of books. He's one in specific about the boys, I'm not sure what the title was, but the boys who hung out on the beach in the summer. Was there a passage in that book that's inconsistent with him now saying, I don't remember, and he remembered before? It's all part of the people who are listening to this. Who are they going to believe? Because that's what it's going to be about tomorrow. It's not so much the questions, it's the answers, and who do you believe as to what they're saying.
Well, Mark Judge himself is implicated in some of these accusations, you know. But I want to talk to you about the credibility of the 3 women coming forward, because as you pointed out, they did make these accusations under penalty of perjury, so they have to know the consequences if they are coming up with this just as a lie, right?
Absolutely. Look, anytime a witness is going to come forward, whether it's in a civil case, whether it's in a criminal case, whether it's at a hearing like this, and you are swearing to tell the truth, that's at the core of our system. If someone is going to stand in front of this body and raise their hand and lie or swear it out on a piece of paper, then our whole system comes crumbling down to the grounds. We have to believe people when they say they're going to tell the truth. Now, do we have to believe everything they say? No, because people can have different recollections of events that transpire, of how they saw things, when they saw things. But if their accounts are corroborated by others, and you have no reason to doubt their credibility, and you're able to analyze what they're saying, and you want to believe them, well, then that's your right to believe them. And if that's enough to disqualify Kavanaugh from taking this position, then that's what the senators have to decide.
And I know there's an attorney coming in from Phoenix who handles sexual abuse cases who will do the questioning. How tough is that job?
It's an incredibly tough job, because we all have to remember this is not a criminal proceeding. This is not a situation where Kavanaugh's being prosecuted for having committed a sexual battery. This is a confirmation hearing. So nobody represents anyone here. The woman who's coming in to do the questioning is being put there instead of a senator because they feel that'll soften the blow. Well, if she's too hard on this witness, it's not as if she's trying to cross-examine this witness to prove that her client is not guilty because the government hasn't brought enough evidence forward. She's there to ask questions of this witness, not to run her through the mill. She's certainly going to try to attack her credibility and try and poke holes in it, but then that leads us to question, well, have people already made up their mind that she's not telling the truth or that Kavanaugh is telling the truth? This is supposed to be a fair and balanced body who's going to ask questions and find out if the answers lead them to a confirmation or to reject his confirmation.
Thank you, David. We'll find out at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning
Yes.
how this goes. David Weinstein joining us. Thanks, David.
And our live coverage of tomorrow's hearing for Judge Kavanaugh and Blasey Ford begins tomorrow at 4:30 a.m. with CBS 4 This Morning. That's followed by CBS This Morning at 7. And there's an extra hour of CBS This Morning at 9. Also, CBS News will have gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Kavanaugh hearing starting at 10.